What if all the world's ice melted in a single day? What if every single piece of ice on Earth, or every glacier, every ice cap, every frozen tundra, melted in a single day? Not over centuries, not gradually, all of it, today. Before we get into what happens, let's get clear on where all this ice actually sits. Around 90% is in Antarctica. About 9% is in Greenland. The remaining 1% is in glaciers scattered across every mountain range on Earth. The Alps, the Andes, the Himalayas, the Rockies. It's not evenly distributed. It's concentrated at the poles and on peaks. Let's get the scale clear. Earth holds about 26.5 million cubic kilometers of ice. The Antarctic ice sheet alone is nearly 3 kilometers thick in places. The Greenland ice sheet covers 1.7 million square kilometers. The moment the ice begins to melt simultaneously across the globe, something terrifying happens almost instantly. Meltwater begins flowing into every ocean, river, and valley at once. 70 meters. That number keeps coming up. But what does 70 meters actually look like? The Statue of Liberty is 93 meters to the torch. Big Ben's clock tower is 96 meters. So we're talking about a wall of water almost as tall as Big Ben, covering every coastal city on Earth simultaneously. Scientists estimate that if all land ice melted, sea levels would rise by approximately 70 meters. That's not over thousands of years. That's happening in 24 hours in our scenario. Within the first hour, the signs are subtle but unmistakable for anyone paying attention. Coastal tide gauges begin reading abnormal. Weather monitoring stations in Antarctica go dark. Storm drains in low-lying cities start backing up as the water table rises. Nobody is panicking yet. Most people have no idea what's coming. London, New York, Shanghai, Tokyo, Miami, all of them sit below 70 meters of elevation. Within hours, they would be completely submerged. These aren't close calls. They're gone. We're not talking about a slow flood. Meltwater would be released at a rate impossible to evacuate from. Billions of people live in low-lying coastal zones. The speed alone would be catastrophic. Let's do the maths. 3 billion people need to move inland. The average walking speed of a human is 5 kilometers per hour. Many coastal cities are 20 to 50 kilometers from higher ground. At walking pace, you need 4 to 10 hours minimum. And the water is rising faster than that. You can't walk out of this. Antarctica holds 58 meters of sea level rise all by itself. As it melts, the land underneath begins to rise. The land literally bounces upward, isostatic rebound. Greenland alone holds 7 meters of sea level rise. As the ice sheet disappears, the island transforms. Rivers form overnight. Bedrock is exposed for the first time in millions of years. One of the stranger effects, rivers near coastlines begin flowing backwards. As sea level rises faster than the river can drain, the ocean pushes back up into river mouths. The Thames, the Mississippi Delta, the Ganges. Rivers that have flowed one direction for millions of years suddenly reverse, and cities flood from the wrong direction. The Himalayas, the Alps, the Rockies, the Andes, every mountain glacier on Earth melts simultaneously. Rivers downstream explode beyond their banks. Cities and farmland that depend on glacier meltwater get a terrifying surge, then eventually nothing. Arctic permafrost, frozen ground covering 25% of the northern hemisphere's land surface, begins to thaw. Locked inside it, hundreds of billions of tons of methane, a gas 80 times more potent than CO2. Methane is 80 times more potent than CO2 over a 20-year period. Releasing that much in a single day would trigger a greenhouse warming effect unlike anything in recorded history. Ice reflects sunlight. Antarctica and the Arctic act like giant mirrors, bouncing solar energy back into space. Remove them both in 24 hours, and the Earth suddenly absorbs dramatically more heat. Cold meltwater flooding the oceans, it would initially cool surface temperatures, but not for long. The loss of ice cover means ocean temperatures would begin rising rapidly within weeks. From space, the change is visible within hours. The white reflective surfaces of Antarctica and Greenland begin to darken as ice gives way to exposed rock and open ocean. Earth's albedo drops measurably in real time. A satellite watching Earth would see it slowly stop glinting. The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, the ocean conveyor belt that regulates climate across Europe and North America, would collapse. Suddenly, the UK and Western Europe would face brutal winters despite a warming planet. All that melted ice is fresh water. Pouring 26 million cubic kilometers of fresh water into salt oceans doesn't just raise levels, it dilutes salinity. Marine ecosystems that depend on salt concentrations would face mass extinction. As ocean water floods inland, it sinks. Salt water percolates into the groundwater table beneath cities and farms. Wells that have provided fresh water for centuries become contaminated within days. The land looks dry. The water beneath it is ruined. Paradoxically, a world drowning in water faces an immediate freshwater crisis. Glaciers supply drinking water to over 2 billion people. With all of them gone in a day, those supply chains collapse permanently. Farmland doesn't just flood. It becomes unusable. Soil saturated with salt water is dead. Grain belts across North America, Europe, and Asia disappear underwater or become sterile. Roughly 40% of the global population lives within 100 kilometers of a coastline. That's over 3 billion people who need to move simultaneously in one day. There is no plan for that. Coastlines are political borders. When they vanish under 70 meters of water, international boundaries become meaningless. Who owns the seafloor? Which countries disappear entirely? The Maldives, the Netherlands, Bangladesh, Vietnam's Mekong Delta, Florida. These don't just flood. They cease to exist as nations. Every building, every road, every monument submerged permanently. Not everyone loses. Antarctica and Greenland, freed from ice, expose millions of square kilometers of new land. Russia, Canada, and high-elevation nations suddenly become the most desirable real estate on Earth. Not every city dies. Cities built on higher elevation. Denver at 1,600 meters, Addis Ababa at 2,300 meters, Bogota at 2,600 meters, are completely untouched. Overnight, they become the most strategically important cities on Earth. With 70 meters added to sea levels, the new global coastline cuts through places that today sit far inland. The Himalayas gain coast, the Swiss Alps gain coast, the Rockies become beachfront property. A 70-meter sea level rise doesn't just destroy old routes, it creates new ones. What were mountain passes become navigable straits. Landlocked countries like Bolivia, Ethiopia, and Switzerland suddenly have direct ocean access. Geography redraws itself completely, releasing that much water that quickly would trigger tsunamis. The rapid shedding of ice sheets into the ocean generates waves that travel at 800 kilometers per hour. Remove billions of tons of ice from the poles, and the Earth's crust responds. Isostatic rebound triggers earthquakes along existing fault lines worldwide. Ice suppresses volcanoes. The weight of ice sheets keeps pressure on volcanic systems below. Remove that pressure simultaneously across Iceland, Antarctica, and the Pacific Ring of Fire, and volcanic activity surges. Volcanic ash, methane, water vapor. The atmosphere within days looks dramatically different. Thick cloud cover worldwide. Reduced sunlight. A secondary cooling effect competing with the warming. Polar bears, penguins, seals, Arctic foxes, any species whose survival depends on ice is functionally extinct within 24 hours. No adaptation time. No migration option. Gone. Coral reefs cannot survive the combined shock of temperature change, salinity dilution, and ocean acidification. The Great Barrier Reef, the Coral Triangle, bleached and dead within days. Power stations, water treatment plants, road networks, rail lines, airports, ports, almost all major infrastructure sits in low-lying areas. In a single day, civilization's nervous system gets submerged. Undersea cables, coastal server farms, power grid hubs. Much of the internet runs through low-lying coastal zones. As they flood, global communications begin to fragment. Most global shipping runs through ports on coastlines. Those ports are gone. Supply chains for food, medicine, and fuel collapse simultaneously. Inland populations face shortages within days. Think about what sits at sea level. The Louvre, the British Museum, the Smithsonian, the Vatican, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, the Rosetta Stone, the original Magna Carta, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Every physical record of civilization sits below 70 meters. Mountains, high plains. Any land above 70 meters elevation becomes the new habitable zone. The Tibetan Plateau, the Ethiopian highlands, the Andes, suddenly the most crowded places on Earth. Resource scarcity compressed into a single day. Nations go to war over habitable land, fresh water, and food within weeks. Resource wars at an unprecedented scale. Scarcity also forces cooperation. Nations that were rivals need each other. A completely new world order begins to form, built around the new geography. There is no way to frame this gently. A 70-meter sea level rise in 24 hours would be the single largest loss of human life in history. Hundreds of millions would have no chance to evacuate. Physical survival is one challenge. The psychological dimension is another entirely. Humans have an extraordinarily strong attachment to place. Loss of place, not loss of possessions, is the deepest wound. 3 billion people losing their homes simultaneously is a civilizational trauma without precedent. Day 7. The water has stabilized at roughly 70 meters above current sea level. A new static waterline exists. Survivors on high ground face a completely different planet. Who survives the first 24 hours? People in mountainous nations. People who happen to be on high ground that day. Populations of Bolivia, Nepal, Ethiopia, Switzerland, and landlocked Central Asian nations find themselves, through pure geographic accident, the core of what remains of organized civilization. The world map looks unrecognizable. North America loses its entire eastern seaboard and Gulf Coast. Europe loses the Netherlands, Denmark, and large parts of the UK. Asia loses coastal China, Vietnam, Bangladesh. Entire regions erased. The Amazon basin, currently low-lying, floods completely. Billions of species of plants and animals that exist nowhere else on Earth are destroyed. With new shallow seas forming over previously dry land, vast areas of formerly dry terrain become accessible to marine researchers. The ancient riverbeds, the submerged forests, the drowned cities, all now potentially mappable and researchable for the first time. Much of sub-Saharan Africa sits above 70 meters. For the first time in history, some of the world's most resource-poor nations would be geographically dominant, surrounded by desperate migrants. Within months, something extraordinary begins. Nature adapts. New shallow marine ecosystems form over what was once land. New wetlands appear at the waterline edges. Life finds a way. Yes. Despite the catastrophic death toll in the first 24 hours, humanity as a species would survive. Earth still has billions of square kilometers of habitable high-elevation land. The species endures, changed forever. The humans who emerge from this would be fundamentally different in outlook. Every civilization that has survived a catastrophic reset has emerged with different values, different priorities. A post-flood humanity living on mountain plateaus, dependent on each other, would likely rebuild with a different relationship to the coasts, to ice, and to the planet that changed on them. Within a generation, new cities are built at high elevation, new agriculture developed, new shipping routes established across what were once mountain ranges. Human adaptability is our greatest evolutionary trait. A civilization that survived this would never take ice for granted again. The irony? We are already melting it, just slowly. Scientists estimate several meters of sea level rise within this century. The slow version of this disaster is already in motion. Right now, sea levels are rising at approximately 3.6 millimeters per year. That number is accelerating. The scenario we just described isn't science fiction. It's the extreme, fast-forward version of something already underway. Jakarta, already sinking so fast it's been partially abandoned. Miami Beach, already spending billions on raised roads. Amsterdam, Venice, Rotterdam, Mumbai. These cities are already experiencing the beginning of the slow version of this scenario. The slow flood has already started. Reduce emissions, protect remaining ice, invest in coastal defenses now while there is still time. The window to prevent catastrophic sea level rise is not closed yet, but it is narrowing. The ice hasn't all melted yet. We still have time, but today's slow melt is tomorrow's emergency. Unless we treat it like the disaster it actually is. What if all the ice melted in a day? Civilization ends. What if we let it melt slowly over a century? The answer is almost the same. If you made it this far, you clearly like your what-if scenarios catastrophically large. Subscribe for a new one every single week. And drop a comment. What should we melt, flood, or destroy next?